This thing that I have found is what I would call my gracious space. Hello everyone, Jack Carlisle here once again with Gracious Spaces. And I just want to say that there's so many people out there that have a gracious space, and we are here and our goal is to share those gracious spaces with people. And today's guest is really exciting because her gracious space is pretty thrilling to me, and it's something that I shy away from because I don't know a lot about it and I shouldn't. So here we have Kendra Vandruff here today. Welcome, Kendra.
Hello, thank you for having me on the podcast. I'm so excited.
So Kendra, take us into your gracious space a little bit.
Yeah, so I would say throughout the years, a place that has always been just refueling and refreshing to go back to and travel in are our U.S. national parks.
Yes.
I grew up going camping in them. My dad, growing up, always dreamed about taking his kids camping. He always talked about I couldn't wait to take my kids camping. And my first trip actually was kind of an introductory into a state park in Big Sur, and I was one. So my first camping trip was I was just fresh and just a 1-year-old.
And your parents were like, load up the car and we're taking the family.
Yeah.
I can picture that. It's sort of like the American ideal of vacations, a big station wagon, camper, a VW bus, all these things, and you're loading up the family and the kids, and you're off to explore.
Yeah. And we've just had so many, just me, my siblings, and we've just had so many amazing experiences with our family, and they've all been kind of affiliated with the outdoors and exploring. And we've even had our grandparents join on both sides of my family. So I have a lot of fond memories with them. And I just feel like whenever I go back to these places, it's like I just feel like, oh my goodness, like all the memories held here. Yeah. I just can't wait to carry on that tradition with my own kids. Right. And so, yeah, growing up, it was always an important thing in my life, just going out and exploring and being in the outdoors. And there were times when I was a teenager where I was like, I'm too cool to go see this waterfall.
Yeah, with my family.
And I look back and there's phases in life where your kids may be all ecstatic about it. And just push through if your kids aren't really into it once they hit the teen years.
Well, I think yes. I think kids, there is that age where they're like, well, I'd rather be doing something else. But there's also that part where you're either camping or you're out there and you see other kids, and you probably have built relationships or connect with these other kids, whether you want to or not. It comes organically. Yeah. And that's a part of the process as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Tell me a little bit more about what you were just referring to about being out there and the memories. I would imagine it's sort of grounding as well. These two tall trees around you, waterfalls, rocks.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about how that feels for you.
Yes, I would say for me, growing up, I absolutely loved just being outside and exploring just the forest, even the redwoods were some of my favorites to see. And I just remember feeling so thankful to be unplugged. And back then, being unplugged was not as hard as it is now. But just being with my parents, aunt and uncles, grandparents, and my cousins, just around the campfire and stargazing and playing games around the campfire. Yeah. I just remember thinking this is just the best. It doesn't get better than this. I'm here with some of my favorite people, and just being able to not have any external extractions. And
you're absolutely right. The old-fashioned way, right? When we didn't have that connectivity in our pocket or, laptops and whatnot. How do you put yourself in a place to remove yourself from that need? Because I know for me that would be very difficult. I think to. Yeah. You probably don't get any reception in some of these places, so that might be an easy way. But,
it's true. I mean, most national parks, some little random pockets of it, you'll randomly get a bar. possibly. But sometimes you almost are bummed when you do, because you're like, oh man, that temptation is there to like just post a few photos right now or whatever, or see who likes it. And I think what I love about the national parks is, Wi-Fi is not a priority for them. That's not why you're there.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I would say just growing up, I remember always looking forward to my dad planning a trip, and he would always play James Taylor. And so I always associated James Taylor with the camping songs. I'd be like, Dad, is it time to play the camping songs?
James Taylor.
And so James Taylor is what we would play, sometimes Norah Jones. And we would go up PCH. And I remember going to Yosemite for the first time. And that's one of California's most visited national parks, arguably, I believe it is. And I just remember thinking, holy cow, this is crazy. It's honestly just breathtaking. I think it's the largest waterfall, the tallest waterfall in North America is in Yosemite, Yosemite Falls. And my dad would walk us throughout the park, and he'd be like, and this is the waterfall that's 3 times the height of the Empire State Building. And I was just blown away.
Trivia.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. And I just think national parks in particular, what's so neat about them is just how much of a priority it is for them to just be preserved. Yeah. And John Muir really made sure that would happen. And he showed the president, hey, like we got to mark this off and protect this land from being developed. And so he just sought out to do that, and it just grew from there. Yeah. And I think it was actually Yosemite that I learned from my dad. I need to look into this, but he shared that Yosemite was the first national park that inspired the concept of national parks. And Yellowstone was the first official national park, and that's in Wyoming. But after seeing Yosemite, people were like, okay, we need to start getting on this process of preserving some of like these natural landscapes that are just too beautiful.
Incredible beauty.
There's no way to describe it. And so, but yeah, Yellowstone was the first, but Yosemite inspired it, and Yosemite was shortly protected thereafter.
Well, and you take it up a notch, then you're also protecting ecosystems. You're protecting wildlife, plant material, all of these things for generations to come.
Yeah.
I'm not sure quite on numbers, and you may know this, but I believe there's a little over 40 official national parks, and then there's 600 and some within that system as well.
So it's grown quite a bit. So there's officially now 64 national parks.
Oh, quite a bit.
And then there's even more state parks. So there's a lot of state parks. I don't know the exact number, but there are just so many preserved landscapes. And I think, for people that haven't been to a national park before, I just got to think there is such an intentional reason why they're protected. And that to me intrigues me enough to kind of go and explore why that is. And I know for me, when I'm planning a trip or a vacation, literally I always end up in a national park, even if I don't really know exactly.
You just kind of gravitate to that area.
Yeah. And it's so funny because when I got married a couple years back, my husband was like, "Oh, maybe we could go to Hawaii," and I was like, maybe we could. There are some gorgeous national parks there. Yeah. But at the time, COVID was still kind of a thing. And so I had a lot of friends share that their flights were getting canceled when they got married. And I thought, okay, what can we do that we know would be beautiful and that is guaranteed that we could just drive to? Yeah. And so we ended up doing a Utah National Park road trip for our honeymoon. And people thought we were crazy because, you think like the typical like pristine kind of coastal kind of beach relaxing kind of thing. And
no, the other direction.
no. And so we actually registered at REI for our wedding, and we got all of our camping gear basically for life. Yeah. We got like a 10-person tent, even though there was just the two of us. We were like, we'll bring some friends or whatever. Yeah. I don't know. We could do like sprints up and back in our tent.
Roomy.
But yeah, we got to explore Zion, Bryce Canyon, Arches National Park, and Canyonlands. And the one that we didn't get to is called Capitol Reef. But Utah just has some stunning national parks that honestly look like they're from Star Wars. Yeah. It looks like another planet. Bryce Canyon in particular has these hoodoos that I think it's Thunder Mountain from Disneyland kind of tries to mimic it. These like red rock formations that are called hoodoos. But when you're just hiking through them, you really just feel like you're in a whole other world. And it's taken hundreds of thousands of years for those to form through flooding and things like that. And so when you are walking through it, you're just like, oh my goodness, like the people like 100 years ago even that have seen this, like we're all getting to explore like this time capsule that's preserved.
Well, what I love is that you're paying attention to those details. You just mentioned the formation changes. What people saw 100 years ago is slightly different than what we're seeing now due to erosion, weather, wind, that type of thing.
Yeah.
There's something around every corner to be appreciated. A sense of, we talked about being grounded. I would definitely feel that would be the case for me. And then a level of respect for this beauty out there. And so then you guys, I picture all this camping equipment and tents and the whole deal.
Yes.
But you don't necessarily have to go to that length or that extent to visit these national parks. So for someone like me who, a beginner heading out, what advice would you give me to start my journey into exploring national parks?
Yeah. So if camping is not necessarily your thing, another great option is Airbnbs, possibly, or like a home rental kind of thing, like a short-term home rental. A few times when we've brought like a group of 10 people to a national park, what I've done is just looked at Airbnb and find a nice local national park that's close to the gate of the national park. And you can, our tradition is always going to Trader Joe's, loading up our cooler, going to the Airbnb, and you have a well-stocked fridge and freezer for your meals. And you can just have breakfast before you go hiking for the day, pack a lunch even. Yeah. And then once you return home in the evening, you have the comfort of your bed, you've got a shower. And so you can totally have those home comforts while also exploring some cool trails and hikes or viewpoints even. Yeah. You don't necessarily have to do like a full on hardcore hike in some of these national parks to see some of the beautiful landscapes there.
So all levels of experience feel comfortable.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Like Bryce Canyon has some gorgeous overlook points where you can see all the hoodoos. And I was actually talking to an employee here, Nancy, and she was saying that she did the overlook viewpoints of Bryce and said it was one of her favorite parks. Yeah. And she didn't even have to go hiking in it. And she just said it was just so worth the trip to see that. Yeah. And even Yosemite, some of the waterfalls there, it's like maybe a quarter mile or half a mile, just a flat paved road. So even a wheelchair could totally go to the base of some of those, which is really nice. You can even drive to some of the viewpoints. And so, yeah, if camping's not your thing, you can definitely Airbnb it. The second best thing I would call glamping. There's a chain of these like campgrounds that also have these little cabins, and it's called KOA. And you can book.
KOA has been around a long time.
Yes,
yes. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Memories right there.
Yeah. And I did the KOA cabin when I went to the Grand Canyon, and I also did it for Sequoia National Park. And what's nice is you have 4 walls, and it kind of keeps you warmer than like a tent would.
Sure.
And you've got a bed, you've got a mattress, you bring like, say, a sleeping bag to sleep on it or something like that. And then they've got like a fireplace, or not a fireplace, a fire pit. So yeah, you don't get a glamorous fireplace in the cabin, but you get a fire pit outside, so you can just put some camping chairs around it, enjoy the fire.
S'mores.
They have a big table. S'mores are fantastic for that. And so you can kind of get still that camping vibe, but without having to learn how to set up a tent properly,
Right.
and those kind of things. So, because those factors can be kind of intimidating. Another option is simply tagging along with any friend that really knows camping well. So you're
So
like,
I'm
hey,
coming with you guys.
Yeah, yeah.
Your next trip, you tell me I'm taking the time off. You
that
guys
would
are
be
doing it
so
right.
fun. That would be so fun. But yeah, so there's a couple variations that people can totally do if it's too kind of daunting to explore the camping route. So
So this passion of yours, this appreciation for so much beauty, has also turned into a business for you. And I'm going to have to say it. Paint me a picture of what that looks like.
yes, I love
I
it.
had to be punny there. But
Yeah.
but yeah, so this has led into a very amazing, wonderful business that you tell us about that.
Yeah. So growing up, I took art lessons, and art was always a pretty big part of my life. And my grandpa, my mom's dad, was a watercolor artist, and he would buy us watercolor supplies for Christmas. And it wasn't until high school that I opened up one of them to really tap into it, because I had a required assignment in high school to do a watercolor landscape. And for whatever reason, I was super intimidated to paint landscapes in particular, even though I was going and exploring national parks and I loved art. It didn't really occur to me to like kind of pinpoint those together
Right.
yet. And so I just started dabbling with landscapes, and I really grew to love it. And I would kind of get in trouble sometimes in high school for basically drawing or like literally painting in class. But what was funny is that sometimes the teachers didn't care because I still turned in my work.
How can you argue with
Yeah, so
someone taking this painting in class?
Yeah.
I have to kind of laugh.
like I wasn't rowdy, right?
Yeah, no, right. You getting in trouble for that is perfect. That's so you.
Yeah.
I love that. So yeah, what's teacher is gonna tap you on the shoulder and say, "Look, stop that painting."
Totally. And it was kind of fun. And one of the teachers in particular actually, instead of doing an essay, actually asked me to do some artwork for her classroom. And I was like, no problem. So that was pretty funny. But I think all kids have their own unique gifting. And so some teachers will tap into that. So I was really thankful for that. But I just slowly started diving into landscape painting, and I started looking at watercolor landscape, like tutorial books. I started taking some watercolor workshops. And my grandpa was super excited about it, but he also didn't pressure me about it at all. There was never like, carry on my legacy. Like there was no like outside pressure. It just kind of grew naturally in its own time for me to be kind of excited and drawn to it.
Oh, deep down, he was probably thrilled. I mean, he knew you had your own path, whatever you chose.
Yeah.
But I can imagine he's like super ecstatic that you went that route.
He was really excited, and he lived in Minnesota, and so gradually I would mail him some postcards of my paintings, and he just loved seeing those. And so eventually, I think it was about 2018 was when I really decided to just niche down and only paint national parks. Yeah. And prior to that, when I started watercolor, I was kind of painting a little bit of everything, like some florals and things like that. But then I just kind of found my groove, and my passion was painting national parks. And so I started tagging different national parks in my paintings on Instagram, which was so much fun. And it just kind of eventually grew into this community, this little following of people that just really enjoyed national parks and wanted unique keepsakes of those parks. So maybe it was through artwork or something. And so I started just slowly building kind of just this community that just loved to just see kind of the next interpretation of the watercolor national park that I could kind of come up with. And I eventually started an Etsy shop to start out with. And I was so unofficial, like it's embarrassing. Like my first pop-up, someone asked me to bring my artwork and sell it for like this fundraiser. And I was like, okay. Like I was honestly like, are you sure? Like I just I didn't take myself super seriously at that point yet. I just kind of did it as more so like a creative outlet and a hobby. But I went to do this pop-up and my sister came with me. And people started buying my prints.
You're like, wait a minute.
And I was like, wow, like this is so fun. And then one gal asked for a business card. And I was like, a business card? And so my sister had Post-it notes and like a thick Sharpie. And she like wrote my email in these like chunky letters and handed the gal
Here you go.
a Post-it note.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my goodness, this is kind of funny. And so I eventually started like my own official website, bought a domain for it and everything, and ordered business cards. And it just slowly, unofficially kind of grew from there. And throughout, I would say, was it 2016 to 2018 or so, I did work in retail. I worked at my grandma's clothing boutique. And during my lunch breaks, I was always painting. And I just loved it. And then 3 years into that, she retired. And by then, my website was developed and everything. I was starting to do more like pop-up art markets and things like that. And so I thought, maybe I could just try to give this gig like a full-time kind of effort. And so instead of applying for another retail job right away, maybe I can just give this some breathing room and just see what happens from just diving in.
It, right?
Yeah. So I started intentionally planning my own trips to national parks. And so prior to that, it was like usually my family or my dad would coordinate something. And so I started coordinating my own trips. And let me tell you, the first couple trips were like gnarly because I was always in charge of cooking for these trips because I love to cook. Okay. And so I actually went to culinary school before I went to art school. So I love cooking. And so I always volunteered myself for that. And I remember this one particular trip I planned to Joshua Tree. I was bringing my Coleman 2-burner stove, packed the cooler thoroughly. My sister and our friends from our church actually were coming with us, and they were loading the car. And I assumed that meant that they would also load my bag, which was near theirs. And so we just hop in the car. We're literally like, I think a half hour outside the gate. And my mom texts me. She's like, you left your backpack. And that was like all my clothes, toiletries, basically all the necessities.
Yes.
Other than food. You need food. And so I think I was so hyper focused on like bringing that.
Everyone filling everyone's bellies. Yeah.
Yeah. And so my first trip, I was like literally in the same outfit for like 3 days. And it was so embarrassing because, we just went with this group and I was just roughing it. Like, and I just acted like, no, this is what you do.
This is exactly
what
you
campers do.
Yeah.
And
no glamping on that trip.
Yeah. So that was pretty funny. And we were like hiking, like we weren't just sightseeing. And so I was like, I'm going to fly into the shower when I get home. So, but that was pretty funny. Another trip that I planned towards the beginning was I packed, I think, instead of using suitcases for whatever reason, I thought it was a good idea to pack everything in like Trader Joe's paper bags because we had a bunch of them. And at the time, my boyfriend, now my husband, was on this trip.
Oh no, he was like, what are you doing with these bags?
He is so efficient. Like if you know my husband, Eric, he's an Enneagram type 1. He's organized and all these things. And not that I'm like super unorganized, but at that trip I was like, I mean, a bag's a bag. Like we'll use it. And so when we needed to grab like any one thing from the car when we were setting up camp, you had to like bring all the bags out just to find the one thing.
Dig through them.
And so I definitely learned a lot of lessons on how to just be a little bit more efficient with these trips. Yes. But through those trips, I really gained a lot of just a lot of experience through exploring different angles of the national parks and incorporating that into my paintings. And so through just sharing them just in the interwebs on Instagram and Pinterest and things like that, I just knew like, okay, people really love these places. Yeah. These national parks are really important to people. And so it was really neat to just bring kind of a creative way of viewing them through watercolor. And so after just launching my website and things like that, I think it was actually my mom, but she came into the potting shed here.
Huge supporter of your mom.
Yes.
Yeah, such a sweet lady.
She really is. She's just no shame. Like she's just like, hey, my daughter, she does watercolor and from floral to landscape, because I did do floral for a while.
I remember that day so vividly. Yeah.
Yes, and she was just like, do you have a watercolor gal that could teach workshops? Because if not, like, I've got the person. And so
I think at first I thought it was her promoting herself.
Oh, really?
I'm confused.
Yeah, that's so funny. Yeah. And she's also an amazing artist as well, but she also was an art major too. But so stemming from that,
now 1 second, was that your mom's dad then? That was the grandfather. Okay, yeah. So it ran through the family.
Yeah, it really did. And even my brother is a full-time artist. He does media arts and animation, and he honestly can paint anything. And so I do think what art can be taught, but I do think there can be just this natural gifting, whether it's just maybe you're the first artist in your family, it's just like a natural inclination for you that you're good at, or even a little bit of genetics. I do think that can be passed down in some way. But I started to teach workshops here, and I want to say, was that 2019 or so? But I started to teach workshops here, and that has been such a blast. And I've absolutely loved it. And getting to just show people these places through watercolor. And we even have some people that have driven out from certain areas that are near the national parks to come take the workshops, which is really neat.
What I love too, Kendra, is you sit down with the group, and all levels of skill can be taught. Because I've popped in a couple of these, and when you're finished, I'm looking at them all, and it's like they're all on the same level. It's amazing. So if someone's somewhat intimidated about sitting down and doing watercolor and they've never touched a brush,
right,
you give them this ability and know-how to walk away with something really beautiful. And people that are focused on national parks appreciate that so much. You're right, what you just said. They've come to put their expression and their love and their passion and appreciation for national parks on canvas.
Yeah, so I love that. Cool. I'm so happy to hear that. It's been really rewarding to see people that have never done watercolor before come into the workshops. And I would say like maybe 6 or 7 times out of 10, it is new people that haven't done watercolor before or are trying a new hobby. And so it's just been so cool to see these students kind of just tap into that creative side.
Yes.
And my favorite part is when we get into this like creative flow state where we're in a part of the painting where, say if we're doing a lot of pine trees or something, you know, I play some music in the background once I demo how to paint the pine trees, and just to see these students just get in the zone. And we have a wide variety of ages. You know, I've even had one time I think it was like a 12-year-old sign up. And he was like so into it. It was the coolest thing. And then I have some retired people that also sign up as well. And just to see like multi-generations get into this and tap into a creative side, or even share stories about some of the significant memories that they have in these national parks. Like we just painted Joshua Tree this weekend. We did a Joshua Tree Galaxy workshop. And one of the students had driven from Joshua Tree to take the class, which was neat.
Yeah.
And then the other students, there was like 3 daughters and 3 moms and a few others. And they just shared about how much they enjoyed going to Joshua Tree. And so they were just drawn to try watercolor for the first time because of that.
Yes.
So that's been really, really neat to see.
Well, I think too, we're going to fast forward a little bit now because you yourself can go, let's say, a gift shop in one of these national parks. And what do you occasionally come across?
Yes.
Your product.
Yes.
So did you ever think that would just excel to that level?
Honestly, no.
Yeah.
I really still am like shocked by that because sometimes I'll have friends or family that will say like, oh, I went to Zion National Park
Yeah.
and I saw that they had your watercolor magnets. And I was
So
like,
cool.
no way. And so, yeah, I grew my business by doing wholesale. And so I got to get connected with certain gift shops surrounding the national parks. So like Arches National Park in Utah has my artwork, as well as Zion, some stores around Yosemite, and then all around the Pacific Northwest. I love mountains. I would have to say I hate to pick a favorite, but I love painting watercolor mountains. And so naturally, that's kind of driven me towards painting a lot of Pacific Northwest National Park landscapes. And
what is it about that excites you with the mountains, the height, the beauty, the plant material on them? What draws you to the mountains?
I feel like it reminds me of, like, as a kid, I remember thinking like Narnia was the most beautiful place fictionally. And when I first went to Mount Rainier National Park in Washington, I had seen photos of it on like in calendars, and I was like, what is this place? And it's this beautiful, it's still technically an active volcano, but it has been active in a really, really, really long time. And so don't worry about that. Sorry. I'm like trying to convince people to go, and I'm like, yeah, it's active, but it's been a long time. But Mount Rainier is just this gorgeous white-capped single kind of mountain. Yeah. And then in the summertime, it has like an abundance of wildflowers, not fires. Okay. Anyway, wildflowers everywhere, purple lupins. And it's just stunning. And it looked like someone made it up. Yeah. And I couldn't believe how stunning it was.
Like a painting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like a Bob Ross painting on steroids. Yeah. And I saw a photo of it, and I even made it my screensaver on my phone. And then, I came to realize like, oh, this is a national park. Well, I got to go. So my sister and I went for our first trip. And we also went on a second trip a year later because we loved it so much. So beautiful. And we brought my dad and some friends for this one. And we went end of July, which we didn't even realize was the peak wildflower season. But we happily came to realize it when we were hiking around, and we were just like stunned. There's these gorgeous blue alpine lakes along the trails, and they are just stunning. And we even swam in one of them halfway in the hike, and the temperature was just perfect at that time of year. And that is one of their, technically for Mount Rainier, that's one of their busiest seasons, but it's actually not overly packed at all. Yosemite can get quite crowded in the summer. The best time to go to Yosemite, I would say, is spring, in my opinion, because the waterfalls are humongous in that time. But Mount Rainier in particular was my first kind of really just Pacific Northwest National Park I explored.
How many parks have you visited?
So far, a dozen, but each of those I've kind of visited more than once, because anytime I plan a trip, I'm like, no, let's branch out. But then I'm like, but we loved this one so much. And there's other trails you hear about that you didn't get to do last time. And so I slowly want to build out, I would say the next place or national parks I want to explore would be Glacier National Park, Yellowstone, and the Grand Tetons. Yeah. And I found on Pinterest even, you can keyword search like national park road trips and maybe a few of the names of the parks you're interested in. And if they're kind of close together, people have blog posts about step-by-step, like day-to-day itineraries that you can follow. Oh, so easy. If that kind of decision fatigue is kind of affecting you from going, if you just even Google, but Pinterest is what I typically love. But they will lay out like basically free itineraries of their
experience. You can't go wrong with someone's personal experience.
Yeah.
The Grand Tetons, they have a train ride that I've always wanted to do. Oh. That takes you through one of those fancy train cars and
Yes.
dinners and stuff. I've always wanted. So there's so many options to explore these amazing, beautiful places.
Absolutely. That sounds amazing. I would love to do that. But yeah, I would say I just grew to really appreciate mountains in particular through just going to Rainier. Olympic National Park is stunning. I think it's the wettest place in the U.S. is in Olympic National Park, and they have a gorgeous rainforest there, which we explored. And it's right next to Port Angeles. If you're familiar with Twilight, it's totally the Twilight movies vibes. Like, I was walking and like jokingly with my sister, I was like, Edward. So
living the moment.
Yeah, you could definitely like play some of the Twilight soundtrack and feel like you're in the set. And so yeah, it's kind of nostalgic for those teenage years. But yeah.
What's your goal? Where have you not visited that's on your bucket list?
On my bucket list. Oh, let's see. Well, I would say my biggest goal ever is to be able to visit every single U.S. national park as a whole. That's a big goal of mine. And so I have a long ways to go. However, that's definitely something I would love to do. I know someday when I have kids, that's definitely going to be something my husband and I are drawn to doing, and just sharing about the different history of these landscapes. And honestly, it's really great for kids because you can kind of teach them some like geography stuff and tie it in and things like that. Wildlife is prominent there too. But I would say as far as the next ones, definitely the Wyoming and Montana kind of national parks would be gorgeous. I would also love to see Acadia National Park. It's in Maine. I've heard it's beautiful, and it's in the top 10 most visited national parks in the U.S. So I gotta say it must be pretty good.
It's gotta be up there,
Yeah.
Is Yosemite the number one?
So Yosemite, I know most years it's typically within the top 10, but the number one most visited national park over the years has been Great Smokey Mountains National Park in Tennessee. And the thing is that's kind of interesting about the layout of the U.S. national parks is that on the west side of the U.S., we have a really good high concentration of national parks. So a good majority of them are on the western side, but there's some amazing ones on the eastern side as well. So Great Smokey Mountains National Park is, so many people's favorites. I think this last year, 12 million people visited that park.
That's the one. My family, we went. Growing up in North Carolina, that's the one we gravitated to.
Wow,
pretty amazing.
That's amazing.
Part of the world. Yeah.
I would love to see that. I've heard the views are stunning. And we actually have a tutorial for that one coming up in April, which I haven't done here yet. We're going to be painting the Great Smokies. So
for those listening on that point, how do we find you? How do we go about taking a tutorial? Obviously, there's Instagram. Give us your socials and whatnot.
Yeah. So on Instagram, my handle is just Kendra Vandruff, and the last name is Vandruff. I'm also on Pinterest under the same name. And then on YouTube, you can search me, and that's just Kendra Vandruff and then watercolors. And there I have a lot of landscape tutorials affiliated with the national parks. And then as far as in-person watercolor workshops go, I teach here at the Potting Shed. And I've just loved being able to interact with people, and I'm an extrovert, and so when I teach or when I teach in person, I'm just like, wow, there's real people around. YouTube, if you're not local, it's great to just learn step-by-step tutorials on there as well. And so I like to kind of just feature each park and kind of mix it up and change up which park we're doing each and every week. There I post a tutorial every Wednesday and every Sunday. And then I teach a couple times a month here on Saturdays or Sundays as well. Awesome. So, yeah.
Well, you know what? I thank you so much for your time today. What I love out there, folks, is that Kendra has taken this hobby, something she grew up with, something that she just kind of appreciated as a young gal, and grew it into a business. And we have so many amazing, beautiful places around us. We're so lucky here that we have them all near us in our in our backyards to visit. And then you've taken that to another level for business. So I appreciate you sharing that with us today.
Thank you.
And we'll see you on the next go around.
Awesome.